The next topic we have to study is database users and administrators. So we know that database actually contains a collection of data. That is, a lot of data are stored inside the database. We want to study about the first topic, that is called the database users. So we know that what is database users. Database users are the persons or the users who are taking the benefits of database. That means who are taking values stored inside the database. So that is called the database users. And we can classify the database users into different categories based on their need and the way in which they access data from the database. That means based on the types, we can divide the database users based on two factors. The first one is their need. What is the need? What data is needed by that particular user? Since we are storing every data or all the data inside the database, only the needed data need to be taken from the database. So based on that factor and the way using in which manner they are accessing the data from the database, we will divide the database users into different categories. So here you can see the main four types of users. The first one is called the application programmer. The second one is called the sophisticated user. The third category is the standalone user. And the last category is naive user. So now we can study what are the meanings of each types of users. So which are they? The types of users are mainly we are going to now here we are going to discuss about four types of users. The first one is the application programmer. The second one is the sophisticated user. Third one is the standalone user, and the last one is the naive user. So we can study the meaning of each and every types of users. The first users that we are going to discuss is application programmers. So we know the meaning of application. So actually these type of programmers are developers. And they will interact with the database using different DML queries. So we already studied about the types of database languages. We mainly used two types of languages are data definition language in order to define the database. Then comes the data manipulation language. That means these type of languages contain certain statements or commands which are used to manipulate the database. So manipulation means we can insert value to the database, we can retrieve value from the database, we can make updation to the database, or if you want we can delete the data from the database. So all these things can be done by a DML commands. And this type of users, as we said, that is application programmers, they are actually developers, and these developers can interact with the database using different DML queries. So as we said, it is application programmers. They will write application in different high-level languages like Java, C++, or any such language. So they will write application programs, and inside the application program they will write certain statements or certain programs they will write in order to access data from the database, or in order to communicate with the database so that they can access data which is stored from the database. So that is the meaning of application programmers. So application programmers are developers who can do DML, who can access, that is mainly they are using DML type queries. They are accessing the database in order to perform manipulation, and they will write application programs, and inside the application program they will write certain code which will help to connect with the database and to access data which is stored from the database. That is mainly in order to communicate with the database. So that is the first type of user. The second type of user is called the sophisticated user. So what is sophisticated user? So as the name says, it is a little bit complicated. Okay, these type of users are actually database developers. That is, they are the master of database, and they will write SQL queries in order to select, in order to insert, in order to delete, or in order to update data from the or to the database. That is Sophisticated users are database developers. So they will write the SQL queries in order to perform different manipulation of data. Then actually they are not application programmers because they are only working at the back end, and they will directly interact with the database, because as I said, they are backend users, or they are backend developers. They will mainly use the SQL type languages in order to perform all the things related to the database management system. So this is the third type of user. Then the last type of user is the standalone user. So when you know that what is the meaning of standalone. So actually, suppose that if we have a business or something, we have to we have to use certain database in order to store our own information. That is informations about the purchase, or informations related to the anything related to our business. If you want to store, if you have large amount of data is there, if you want to use a database, then we have to create a database for that. So these type of users are actually users who will use these type of databases for their personal use, and actually they are not making any software for them. They will purchase it ready made. That is, ready made databases will be available, which may contain certain menus or certain graphical user interfaces are there. For example, if you are considering any supermarket, any chain of supermarket or anything, they will have their own software will be there. Actually it is not created by them, they will purchase from somewhere. But whenever we saw the billing system or anything, the billing system, then we can see that there will be a graphical user interfaces will be there, and using that graphical user interface, this type of users will interact with the database. And last type of users we have to study is about the naive users. Actually these users are not are using the database using an existing application. Actually they are not the application programmer, they are not the master of the DBMS, they are not doing anything related to DBMS. That is not database programmers. That is, they are not database programmers or application program developers. Actually they are only using the existing software which are available. For example, we are using a lot of we are naive users in certain area, like ATM or reservation banking, ticket booking system, or online library system. So in all the systems we are just using based on some information, we are accessing data from the database. In order to help us, there are certain application programs are there which is already developed, and these application programs will interact with the database and gives result back to these type of users. For example, if you are considering an ATM machine, ATM machine contains a user application program or a user interface will be there. We will type our PIN, or we will specify the details of the us. So based on our details, if it is correct, we can access amount from the bank. So actually our details are stored inside the bank's database, and there is a front portion, that is the front end will be any user interface. We are not aware about anything in detail. We are just inserting our PIN number and we are getting the money back. So these are the main 4 types of users. So this is the main point we discussed now, that is we are dividing the types of users. So as we see these type of users, we can see that they are using the database in different way. That is, some types of users are only taking the are application programmers, some are database designers, some are standalone users, some are naive users. So we can divide mainly the types of users into, based on their use, we can divide these types of users into 4 major categories. So the next topic we have to study is what is database administrator. I think we all have heard, or you all have heard about DBA, database administrator. So who is this database administrator? So that is the next point we have to study. We know that database management system is a collection of data and a set of programs in order to access that data. So there must be a central control of both the data and the programs that are used to access the data. The person who has the control of the entire data or entire database is called the database administrator, which is in short we can call it as DBA. And DBA will have various functions will be there. So here we can see the main functions of a database administrator. So whenever we studied about the different types of database users, they are only using data, they are only accessing data stored in a database using data manipulation language. That means they are only manipulating or changing or inserting or retrieving data from an existing database. So we have to think who is creating the database. That is, we studied about the data definition language. Data definition language means it is actually here we are creating the schema or the structure of the database, which are the different fields needed, which are the different tables needed. So like that, everything is actually defined using the DDL. So the database schema is actually structured by the database administrator. That is called the schema definition. Schema means structured definition. So he will use certain DDL commands in order to perform that. So that is the first function of a database administrator. The second function is storage structure and access method definition. So how we have to store the data, how to access the data stored in the database. So that is also defined by the database administrator. Next comes the schema and physical organization modification. Suppose that we have in our college there will be a database administrator. He may create a schema based on our existing structure. Suppose that the organization has suppose a new department is there in the suppose that a new department or new course is introduced in the college. So the existing schema need to be modified or changed. So this change is done by the database administrator. So he has to do certain improvements, certain things he had to do in order to improve the performance of the existing system. So that is also the task of the database administrator. So mainly the functions of DBA are schema definition, that is defining the structure of the database management system or the database. Then the storage structure, how to store the data, or access method, how to access. This will be defined by the DBA. Then modification to the existing organization or existing system, that will also be done by the DBA. The next functions of database administrators are granting the authorization of data access. We know that whenever we are discussing about the college will have a database which contains different data. So for a student, in the case of a student can access certain data from the database. If he or she is trying to access the data from a database which is not given to him or which is not allowed to him, there may be an error. That means the data. So the granting permission, that is for certain types of users only read permission of certain data will be allowed. For certain types of users write permission is allowed. So like that, based on the types of users, certain data access, that is accessing of data is restricted. So the granting authorization is done by the database administrator. The next one is regulate the parts of database. So we studied about the view. View means for different types of users, he can only access the data which are available to him or needed to him or her. So for a student, in the same example, I took the student's case. Student can only access their sessional mark or their attendance only. They cannot access other information about the college. So that is their view. So in the case of teachers, Teachers can access details about the students and their details, that is that teacher's details. So it is the view of a teacher. So like that we can it is a task of the database administrator in order to regulate which all part of database should be accessible to different types of users. So all these access rights will be stored inside a table, so that if a person is trying to access some data which is not accessible to which is not allowed to him, then we have to protect that data from the unauthorized access. So for that a system structure is there which contains all this details about which all users can access which all data. Uh, so that is about the database administrator. So it is very important question, that database administrator. And one more point is that about the database administrator, that is the routine maintenance. We know that the routine maintenance activities are very important in the case of a database, because periodic backup should be done. That is, either we have to store in any secondary device or in remote servers, such that suppose any kind of issue occurs like flood or any kind of disaster occur, we have to store all this data for later use. That is, whenever we need to save this data. So for that, periodic backing up of the database is needed. And the next function related to the routine maintenance, the next function is ensuring that enough amount of free disk space is available for normal operation. If needed, need to do the upgrading. Then monitor DBA should monitor the jobs which are running on a database and ensure the performance. If any performance degradation is there, need to do appropriate measures should be done in order to improve the performance. So all these are the functions of database administrator. So whenever we are considering the database administrator, he has a set of huge jobs are there, from designing the database up to maintaining the database. So this is about the database administrator.